happened to Daunte was murder. When I got that call about Daunte, I couldn't believe it. I fell to the ground in pain that no one should have to go through. It was the hardest time of our life. We lost a very special person. So I write this letter to you, Daunte Demetrius Wright. We miss you more than ever. Our lives aren't normal anymore. I think about you every day. I lost not only my best friend, but my baby brother. I re- would remember when we would play games when we were young, and you would get mad if you lost, and you would start crying and turn red in the face because you didn't win. I remember when me, you, dad, and everybody used to go fishing, and we would argue over who was going to catch the biggest fish. Everything was a competition between us boys. Now we won't be able to compete with each other anymore. I won't be able to see you get old. I won't be able to hear your voice change. I won't be able to tell you I love you one last time. I think about this stuff every day. You were stripped away from us. This has been the longest, most alone, miserable times of our life. We never felt the pain like this. We lost a very important piece to our family. I promise I will never give up fighting for you because that's what big brothers do. So I wrote this little poem I have. Your memory is my keepsake. We'll never be apart. God has you in his keeping, but we'll have you in our heart. You never said I'm leaving. You never said a goodbye. You were gone before we knew it, and only God knows why. There has been a million times that we needed you, and a million times we cried. If our love could have saved you, you never would have died. In life, I love you dearly. In death, I love you still. In our hearts, you hold a place that no one could ever feel. It broke our heart to lose you, but you didn't go alone, for part of us was with you when God called you home. I promised to my family that I would take care of everybody, including our siblings, Dallas, Destiny, Diamond, Monica, Marcus, and of course your baby Daunte Jr. I cannot express how painful it was for our family to see the defendant smiling in her mugshot immediately after being convicted of killing my brother. I respectfully ask the court to give a strong sentence that accounts for the severe pain and loss that our family has experienced. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Rest in peace, Daunte Wright.
Thank you. Diamond Wright, please come forward. And Ms. Wright, will you please state and spell your name?
Diamond Wright, DIAMOND WRIGHT.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diamond Wright. I am Daunte Wright's second youngest sister. I never thought in a lifetime that I'd be standing here doing this. I never thought that my brother would be killed. Would be killed by the same people we're supposed to feel protected by. I know that the charge is manslaughter, but I believe this should be called murder. Ever since my brother was killed, my heart's been shattered, and the only thing that's putting it back together is the memories we shared. I feel like I've been living in a complete nightmare. It got so bad to where the point I couldn't sleep. I stopped eating and even got depressed. The death of a loved one is not only an emotional pain, but also a physical pain. The defendant should be prosecuted and sentenced to the highest extent. You can't tell me this was an accident. It's in plain sight. She has been a police officer longer than my brother has been alive. How come I have to go see my brother in a metal container just to talk to him? How come I have to pray that my brother hears me cry out to him? How come my family has to groan and moan about the loss of a loved one just because the defendant's actions were reckless? Daunte was my brother, my blood, someone who was supposed to grow old with me. How is it that I'm going to see the age of 21 and he didn't? He didn't get to experience the life he was supposed to. Watch his kids grow and watch his kids and parents grow old. Not many of you know Daunte, and I couldn't care less on what anyone else thinks of him. You don't know him. He could light up a whole stadium with his smile and laugh. I miss him stealing food when my mom was cooking at family functions. I miss when he would play fight with me and my little sister. I miss him. And I would trade anyone in this room to get him back. Everyone just sees this as another black man getting killed by the police, but not us. This one hit home. This time it was one of us. Every day I would walk around and it feels like I'm really not here. It feels like I'm just an empty body taking up space. You took my other half. I remember when Daunte was alive and the George Floyd killing was being discussed a lot. Me, my mom, and Daunte were having a talk, saying just maybe we have enough white in us for us not to be a threat to the police. We were wrong. We have repeatedly seen that one hint of black in our skin makes us a target. This is sickening. I miss you, Daunte. I miss your smile, your laugh, the way you twirled your hair when you were nervous or thinking about something. I miss when you used to come upstairs just to talk stuff and then run back down. You were a great big brother. You taught your sisters how to be tough, how to listen, and how to calm down when we were upset. You really did your big brother role well. I love you, Daunte, and you will always be in my heart until we meet again. Thank you.
Miss China Walker Whitaker.
Now, if we could just have a moment.
Sure. Okay, Miss Whitaker, will you please state your full name and spell it?
China Marie Whitaker, Chyna, Marie Marie, Whitaker, Whitaker. Can I start? Okay. My name is China Whitaker. I am the mother of Daunte's only child, Daunte Wright Jr. Daunte was born 25 weeks premature and had to stay in the NICU for a little over 2 months. During that time, his father and I were very concerned about him making a full recovery. However, by the grace of God, he is still here today. He is now 2 years old, and since April 11, 2021, fatherless. Kim Potter took my son's best friend away from him, and things haven't been the same since. I am now a single mother, not by choice, by force. My son hasn't seen his dad in almost a year, and I know he doesn't understand what's going on, but he senses his dad being gone. He was used to spending time with his father. Oftentimes, he would stay the night with his dad and have bonding time. That gave me a chance to have a break when I need it. Now I can't even pick up the phone to call him. Due to this situation, my son is a lot more scattered and angry. He acts up a lot more. I now have him in school to learn and socialize with other children to cope during this difficult time in our lives. My child will no longer have the opportunity to spend birthdays or holidays with his dad. Daunte will never get to see his son's first day of preschool, elementary, high school, or college. They didn't even get the chance to play ball or sports together. This is not the way it should be. Every time I look at my son, I'm reminded of what was taken away from him. I show my son pictures and videos of his dad, and his face lights up with the biggest smile, and he says, "Dada." It hurts me because I know if he had the chance to see his dad again, it would fill the hole in his heart that is now there. I can't take the place of his father, neither can any other man. All I can do is hope and pray things get better for us. I now suffer from severe PTSD. Whenever I'm pulled over, I have extreme anxiety. Afraid of making a mistake and something ending up going wrong. I can't watch any movies or videos that have to do with police brutality because it reminds me of Daunte being killed. I got my son a poster of his dad that I keep in his bedroom. Many times I just find him staring at it. My son shouldn't have to wear a rest in peace shirt of his dad. Police are supposed to protect and serve the community. How will my son learn to trust police after what happened to his dad? I don't want my son to grow up afraid of the police or hating them. Nevertheless, it's only fair that Kim Potter be sentenced to the maximum amount of time for executing my son, Daunte Jr.'s father.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll hear the defense arguments regarding sentencing. Mr. Ng.
May it please the court. Kim and state's team. This is beyond tragic for everybody involved. And we hear clearly the statements of the family. We recognize them. There's no disrespect intended to the booking photograph at Shakopee. Ms. Potter indicates they asked her to smile. She smiled. It was not meant to be disrespectful. It was in response to the prison's request. There are two questions for the court today. The first is whether to dispositionally depart, and the second is to durationally depart if you're unwilling to dispositionally depart. So that the key question is the first one. And that is a question of whether or not, in law and in fact, Officer Potter is particularly amenable to probation. And to answer that question, we rely on the probation office to initially evaluate the claim. I often think sometimes probation officers are not given enough credit for the work they do, because there's always disputes at sentencing and they can please no one really. But in this case, the report is exceptional. It's well done, it's well written, it's fair. It says all the bad facts for the defense and all the good facts for us as well. It has a sense of balance to it. And the report does suggest to you that Officer Potter is amenable to probation. It's a recommendation that carries heavy weight because the probation office is what you rely on to make decisions. They do the investigation. They actually talk to the defendant and the family and make a decision or recommendation as to probation and whether she's amenable. And she is, according to that report. So the first hurdle for any defendant asking for amenability findings is to get past the probation report, and we've done that. And that report alone would provide you with authority and reasonable reliance to impose a probationary sentence. This was an unintentional crime. It was an accident. It was a mistake. And the claim in the state's brief as well, the guidelines suggest 86 months, therefore we should follow them. But then if we dig deeper, we realize that the guidelines aren't always followed. And for 60% of the women in Minnesota who face a presumptive commit, they are given probationary dispositions. So on the one hand, we can say, well, the guidelines are 86 months. On the other hand, we should also say they aren't always followed in 60% of the time for females. And for males, they aren't followed in 35%. And in our sister jurisdiction in Ramsey County, they're not followed 50%, according to the most recent evaluation booklet of the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. And the reason they're not followed is that they're too high for many defendants, especially for the first-time defendants. There's a recognition in the court system that individuals who face the court the first time need not go to prison in order to effectuate a just result. So the departure rate is really high. And the question for the court is not only whether she's amenable to probation, but whether she should fall into the 60% range. I got to get my water here for a second. The factors in Trog are clearly found here in State versus Trog. It was a huge opinion when it came out in 1982. We all, for those of us around in 1982, it was an astounding opinion because it provided the probationary option under the new guidelines. And all the factors that are listed in that case, she meets. There's no record. She's got a 26-year work history. She has expressed contrition and remorse, which I'll talk about a little bit later in terms of the quality of it. She bears no risk of recidivism. She can't be a police officer in the future. There's no danger to the public. She'll never own a gun again, obviously. And that she has enormous community support, which I'll talk about in a second as well. So the factors are all there. You have the report that says probation is available, and then we have the Trog factors, which resonate here. And I often think of, I often think of Judge Amdahl and what he might do here. I mean, he gave a break to Mr. Trog, affirmed that sentence. I dare say it's hard to know what anyone would do, but I dare say he might find the factors here persuasive for Officer Potter in his memory. What I think the court misses in all these cases is an interaction with the family. We had a chance to be in this room next door, and there's a jury room attached to it. And so we spent a month with Kim's family, and every day there was a new set that came in to be with her. The husband who's here, there's sisters who are here, and a sister-in-law, but then there were nephews and friends of the family and former police officers, and it was different every day. And they sat in the jury room, and Earl and me and I sat in the courtroom, and we gave them their time. I wish you could have seen it. I think they were all there to be with her, to pay their respects to her for everything that she had done for them. And I wish you could see the tremendous amount of love they had for her and non-judgmental empathy they had for her in that room. And we all found it remarkable. And we all found that we should leave them alone. And even during the jury deliberation, she was there with her 2 sons and her husband, and often in her husband's arms, crying. And the boys were with her, and it was moving, I'll say that. And I think they were all there, all the family members and the friends, because she has lived a virtuous life, and they are trying to pay her back. When I think of Kim, I think of someone who's lived out all the virtues that we could imagine. She's a Catholic. I've talked to her about the Catholic virtues. They're well known to Catholics, but perhaps not the courts. The Catholic virtues are prudence, justice, temperance, courage, fortitude, faith, hope, charity, and the biggest virtue of all, of course, is kindness. And she has lived those out. And if we want to be secular, because we are a secular court, we could refer to Aristotle's virtues. And he gave the advice that if we want to live a virtuous life, we practice small acts of virtue, of course. And Aristotle's virtues are courage, temperance, liberality, patience, truthfulness, friendliness, fortitude. And she's done all of that too. So you have to balance this for one 5-second mistake against all of this. And if the virtues get too complex, I often think of a famous line from Saul Bellows, perhaps his greatest book, where he talks about this. He says, I have a feeling about the axial lines of life with respect to which you must be straight. And later in the paragraph, he says, when the striving stops, they are as a gift. So we can forget about the Catholic virtues or Aristotle's virtues and just say, have you lived a straight line? Have you tried to live a straight line, axial or otherwise? And because she's lived a straight line, she has enormous community support. And had she not lived a straight line, she wouldn't be here with all these people that I'm going to talk about. Now, the state contends in their memorandum that the claim of remorse and amenability to probation is, quote, not particularly compelling. We take issue with that. The public would disagree. Since she's been in prison, she has received 3 boxes of cards. Dear Kim, how are you? Dear Kim, we care about you. And I want those to know who wrote these cards. This is just one of 3, by the way. Thousands of cards that she intends to answer each one. So for those of you who are watching, she will answer you because she always has. But let me give you, and I didn't submit all these to the court. I thought I would read a couple just to give you a sample. And they're all very short and heartfelt. This one's from an officer up in the northern part of Minnesota. My dear Kim, she writes, my name is, I work there. I want you to know that even though we've never met, my heart is completely broken for you. And I'm devastated by your situation. I've also been in law enforcement for a long time. I have 2 sons, and I'm just destroyed on your behalf. What happened to you could have happened to any of us. As a law enforcement community across the country, we are reeling from the shock of this case. This deputy's hope is that you, Kim, and your family will be protected from feelings of despair, and that you may be physically safe. She concludes by saying, I've never been so moved by a situation like this. I want you to know in your heart and remember every day that you are not alone. There's one from Chaska. They're all small cards. People took the time to write her. This is unheard of for a defendant. I dare say no one in this room has ever seen anything like this. Dear Kim, I hope this message finds you well. Heart shape. I do not have the right words, but please know that I support you. I support Blue. You have an amazing community behind you. Please know that you're not alone. You make the world a better place. Be good to yourself and kind to your heart. With love from Chaska. These cards came from all over the country and all over the world, actually. We've gotten cards from Europe. One final one, and then I'll move on. This one's handwritten from Brooklyn Park. Dear Ms. Potter, my name is, my heart aches for your situation. I want you to know you're in my prayers constantly. My husband is a retired state trooper and knows the agony of split-second decisions. If okay with you, I'd like to write you regularly. Sincerely, Judy. And roughly a third of these letters want to have continued communications with her. And then, despite the community support and the remorse that she's going to articulate for you again today after I'm done, the state's claim is that she just hasn't done enough or shown enough. You know, we're all unique individuals, and what the state may find to be a level of remorse that they'd like to see may not be what someone feels in their heart themselves. Her feelings are her feelings. And I get the sense that we're somehow, the state is somehow asking to subjectively evaluate her level of remorse and make a standard of subjectivity that they want. But the court has never been required to parse out that sort of level. You're just supposed to look at the trog factors. Does she express remorse or doesn't she? You can't engage in psychoanalysis here. That's not the holding of trog. She was remorseful the moment the gun was fired. She went into trauma. Her officers at the scene then called in the tragedy, and the police responded immediately. The state contends that she has no quote unquote moral anguish, but the record is replete that she does. I mean, she testified she does. The videos of Kim crying on the ground are replete with moral anguish. I mean, we just can't have a Kafkaesque standard of what remorse is, and then have the state say, well, you haven't met our standard. And we ask, well, what is the standard? And then we just haven't seen enough remorse, so we don't know what the standard is. And so we never can meet what their standard is. But that's not how law works. It's never worked that way. So the question again is whether she's amenable and should be included in those 60%. The state seems to agree that she is at page 6 of their memo. They set out the various conditions that would satisfy them. So it's a hedging memo. It's the kind of memo that concedes that the defense has a claim for amenability. And the conditions that they want, we accept. I mean, they want a meeting with the family, and we accept that. We would do that. In the adversarial system, that's impossible. But now it is, and we would welcome that with court supervision somehow. They want Ms. Potter to give speeches and presentations about weapons confusion. We will do that. She's willing to go across the state and talk about that to the extent that she can discuss the confusion and design features of a taser and how inappropriate they may be. We'll be happy to do that. It was something that was not possible before trial, but it's possible now. The other factors for probation that go beyond TROG are vulnerability to the prison setting. She is in an isolated setting right now in Shakopee. They have her isolated because they don't want her in the regular population. As a police officer, she would be vulnerable to assault. The people in prison, in order to get prison, can be quite violent. Those 40% of the women. So they've isolated it. And the related ground for amenability to probation or for probationary disposition is that there has been a diminution of her mental health while in isolation. And I know the court's intent was never to place her in isolation in prison, but the fact of the matter is that in my discussions with the prison officials, they have decided that she should see no one. So all she does is spend her days getting checked every 30 minutes by a guard, making isolated phone calls, and staying in her cell. And as a result, she, like many people who are in isolation, suffer from a decline of mental and physical health. And we know from statistics and the analysis of social science that isolation in prison is harmful. And so while the court never dreamed that perhaps that she would be in such an isolated setting, it is harming her. So we have on the one hand punishment, but on the other hand, if you send her to prison, you will harm her. We are not in the business of harming defendants. If there's any question about it, we've submitted her therapist's letter to you in confidence, confirming that such isolation is harmful, given her fragile state and her diagnosis. Yeah. The greatest sin of all in the church and in the secular world is a failure of generosity. And I submit to you that Kim never committed that sin, willingly or intentionally. She, in her world, met the obligation to do good. And she did. And because she did good, we ought not be cheap about her life either, because it's been a generous life to everybody she's met. Hennepin County is a wonderful district because it's innovative. It's the busiest district in the state, but the bench is famous for providing programs to first-time offenders to keep them out of jail. The drug court was tremendously innovative. Remand was innovative. The property courts. There's a veterans court, and all these ideas were new once they started, and they were tremendous because they kept people out of prison, and they engaged in sort of a forgiveness if they would do certain things. And in drug court, for example, many people were looking at presumptive commits and never went. They got help, they got treatment, and they were a part of the 30% of men who don't go. And we're famous for this. And this is a district with a big heart. And the other districts across the state have adapted and adopted what we've done here in Hennepin County. We should be thinking along the same lines for her. I've got a got a couple letters, and then I'll reach the durational departure, and then we'll hear from Kim. I've submitted all these to the court. I know you've read them. This is just profound. This too is unheard of. I must tell you, I edited out at least 25 to 50 that I didn't send. They were redundant or just not quite right to send. Some of them questions what happened here, which is okay to voice, but this is tremendous. These are, the last part just came in to Brooklyn Center for her. And I had no difficulty requesting people to write letters. They just kept coming and coming. I have a stack in my office which came in too late. But I have, I've read them all, and there's one that there are a couple that I'd like to quote to you because they tell us who she is and why you should give her a break here. The first one's from an EMT. This was written to me, and I've sent it to you. I want to quote parts of it. I hope I can get through it, frankly. Although I only knew Officer Potter professionally throughout my 25 paramedic career, I had never witnessed Officer Potter mistreat, disrespect, nor use any force on any individual. Officer Potter had an amazing way of connecting with everybody. She was nothing but professional, helpful, caring to the other first responders and individuals in crisis involved in a 911 call. Her aura was infectious and quickly gained respect on any call just simply by walking into the scene. You see, Officer Potter never introduced herself in any other way than Kim to the families and individuals that requested 911 assistance. All the letters said the same thing, but this one was unique. The EMT recounts that in 2009, one of her colleagues was killed. She was at the scene with him as he died. I remember seeing the look on his face after he was lying there on the floor. It was a look I'd never seen before. I couldn't remember some events after this. And it so happened that Officer Potter was at the honor guard at the funeral. Reports Officer Carter kept checking on me as well as my other colleagues, making sure we were all taken care of. She made a huge impact on all of us during this devastating time. The EMT goes on to state that she was suffering from PTSD, which may have occurred here too, in light of her colleague's death. She goes on to say, I thought I was hiding my symptoms pretty well until one day I went on medical call in Brooklyn Center with Officer Potter. We ended up not transporting the individual in an ambulance. We were walking out together. After the call, Officer Potter once again asked me how I was doing. I always responded, fine, thanks. While sitting inside of the back of the ambulance on the bench seat with the back doors of the ambulance open, Officer Potter jumped in the back of the ambulance and shut the doors. So just the two of us were there inside. Officer Potter put her right hand on my right shoulder and looked me straight in the eye. I will never forget what she then said. I've been noticing you have not been yourself for some time now. What can I do to help? Of course, I tried not to show her that I was hurting. Officer Potter sat down on the stretcher right in front of me and grabbed my hand. She told me it was okay to feel pain. I immediately began to tear up, and Officer Potter stayed with me and calmed me. Please keep in mind, I only knew Officer Potter professionally during my whole career. She did not have to take this time, nor did she owe me anything. It was just her personality and character. I can honestly say she genuinely cares for everyone she meets. Officer Potter helped me out of a dark place where I had no idea of the true meaning of PTSD. Without this interaction with Officer Potter, I can say I don't know how long it would have taken me to get help and realize how much of a toll my PTSD from the line of duty and death had taken on me. I had new respect for Officer Potter that day. I truly learned just how much of an impact her kindness meant. Every time I would run into her on a medical call after this day, we would check in on each other and offer a smile. With her help, I was able to retire from law enforcement, being proud of the people I served. She concludes by saying, EMT does, she is an incredible officer as well as person. The world would be an amazing place if everyone would strive to be even half the person she is. Thank you for your time and consideration. So she is amenable. She's particularly amenable, given her life, and a sentence which would stay the prison sentence would be just and right here. And I only approach the durational departure issue as a secondary argument. I offer no disrespect to Mr. Wright and his family, but there is a departure ground, and I would like to articulate it to you. It's all over the letters. Under section 2D.203A1, if the victim is an aggressor, that is considered a mitigating fact. A single mitigating fact is sufficient under the law. That's State versus Solberg, 882 Northwest 2nd, 614, 618, Minnesota 216. There's nothing wrong with raising this as a factor. This is an adversarial system. We're duty bound to advocate for the least amount of time. And again, I offer no disrespect here, but we're lawyers for her. And if the victim was aggressive, it is a mitigating ground. I request the court to make findings for the community, particularly for the law enforcement community, that there was aggression on the part of Mr. Wright. Driving without a license in a car without insurance, perhaps not. There was marijuana in the car, past instance of flight. He was arguably intoxicated with marijuana. which driving a car while intoxicated is a violent act. It can be. I would like the court to acknowledge that warrants of the court do matter and should be honored. This was a warrant for his arrest. I'd like the court to acknowledge that running away from the police officers, three of them is a violent act. It's an aggressive act. And that in this case, it has a potential of harming the officers, and it did, according to the testimony. The state, on the other hand, says this, quotes, Daunte Wright was not an aggressor against defendant. Daunte Wright made no aggressive or violent movements toward defendant Potter or the other officers. Daunte Wright simply pulled away from Officer Lucky in an attempt to drive off. We beg to differ. The testimony of Officer Lucky and Sergeant Johnson is that this was a dangerous situation. Sergeant Johnson was reaching in to prevent him from driving away and could have been hurt. Each said so. This was an aggressive act. I don't know how it couldn't be an aggressive act. There's no requirement that Kim Potter be a victim of the aggression herself. The law says that she can defend other officers on the scene, and so statute 609066. So, she can do that. The whole idea of this victim of an aggressor mitigation is where, as here, there's a self-defense claim that's defeated. It's not perfect. The jury rejected it, but nonetheless, the facts show that the victim, Mr. Wright, was the aggressor. And so when that happens, and it happens here, you have a durational departure ground. The state would also say, quotes, it's repeated again, their claim is that Daunte Wright was, quotes, not combative with the officer. He made no threats to the officer. He did not act aggressively towards the officer. That's at page 11. That's inconsistent with the record. We take issue with that. Her intended response here to the aggression was to use the taser. Clearly, that's what the facts show. And therefore, her conduct was rooted in an innocent mistake, believing that she was using a taser and had a gun. And that makes the case significantly less serious than the typical manslaughter case because it was rooted in a mistake, rooted in innocence at the moment in response to a violent act. That makes it different here. And so you have durational departure grounds. And the state seems to agree that departure grounds do exist because they're falling away from the Blakely claim. No longer are they asking for 10 to 20 years or whatever they were asking for. And the Blakely claim was critical at trial because they got all this evidence in of Daunte Wright's scene of death on the grounds. As you recall, that, oh, it's Blakely, we got to get it in. But they've abandoned that. And I would suggest to you that the case was overcharged. They should never charge first-degree manslaughter for a first-time defendant. They should never ask for 86 months for someone like her. I have a couple more letters than I will have included by my remarks. This one is from the former chief of police of Brooklyn Center. This came in late, but I forwarded it to you. I hope you got a chance to read it. It's he recounts that in July of 2014, I responded with several officers to a report of a toddler who had been struck by a vehicle. What happened here is that the child had been run over by his father and died. Everybody at the scene was having a difficult time with the call, he says. We forget how much trauma police experience on a daily basis, frankly. I took this call very hard, says the former chief, as I had just welcomed my second child to this world a few weeks earlier. Her name was the same name as the little girl who died in the accident. My other child was a 14-month-old girl. I read this letter because the following happened. Quotes, Kim came to my office a few days after this tragedy. She closed the door, sat down, and placed her feet on my desk, something I normally assume would be followed with a resignation letter. She asked me how I was doing. She was talking to me person to person, not as a coworker or manager. In just a few minutes, she had my trust to share the challenges I was having with the accident call. I felt like a 10-ton weight was lifted from my shoulders, and it was life-changing. I was seriously considering leaving law enforcement a year early as a result of this call, and she helped me move past my doubts. Kimberly has helped many other first responders and officers, and if others benefit just by a fraction of how I did, I know it made a notable impact on their lives. In closing, I know there are hundreds of examples of Kimberly's selfless acts to help others. She didn't do it for money, as none of these examples involve pay. She didn't do it for promotion, as nothing here is a rank. She did it because she truly cares about helping others. You know, he didn't have to write that. You know? I returned to family for her. You know, her son has written to you as well. Again, I wish you could have seen this in the room with the two boys. They're young men. Samuel Potter says, my mom is my rock. She is the reason I am where I am today. She's the reason I am the man I am today. Without her, I don't know where I would be. She raised my brother and me to live by the golden rule, to treat people how we want to be treated. I feel I do this to the best of my ability. And we can't ask any more of a young man than that, can we? Finally, the last excerpt I'd like to read, and then I will conclude. It comes from her mother. I think for those who have lost our mothers, this will even resonate further, because once you've lost your mother, there's an incredible vacuum in your life. You may recall that her mother came to the trial a couple times and sat in the corner and watched her daughter testify. She says, I am almost 82 years old, and I need quite a lot of help now. Kim is such a help to me. She's the one who cleans my apartment, changes my sheets, and makes sure I have what I need. She helps me go places because I can no longer drive long distances or drive easily in the dark. She helps me with my banking and my bills so I don't pay anything late. These things have gotten a lot harder for me as I've gotten older, and Kim keeps me on track. Sort of an axial line there too. Kim is my daughter, but she's also my friend. She's the youngest of our 4 children by several years. When the older ones went away to college, Kimberly was the one left at home. She and I spent a lot of time together, and we were very close. I confide in her. She's always able to understand me and help me when I have a question or when I'm worried about something. And she goes on to say this, she's a good person, and it makes me sad that people are talking so terribly about her. They make all kinds of conclusions about her because she chose her career to be a police officer. They just assume things, and they don't even take the time to try to get to know her before they make all kinds of judgments and awful statements about her. We taught her to treat others as she would want to be treated. I feel sad that other people in our city don't do the same. Why do we just keep letting people do this? Kimberly was a good officer, but the job is a stressful one. I don't know how she did it. I wouldn't have wanted to, but we need police officers to protect us. I'm glad someone wants to do it. If we send good police officers to jail when they make mistakes, we won't have anyone who wants to be one, which is a reframe of many letters. She concludes, her mother does, I love my daughter. I'm proud of her. I think that you know in your heart that it was a horrible accident. Please be lenient and give her probation so she can come home and help me. Maybe, this is a very unique defendant here, given her age and career, and it's, I would urge the court to approach it this way. Maybe it's time we should help her too. We're helping all sorts of defendants who come through Hennepin County, and she should be helped. This is something that perhaps she's never going to get over. I don't think she's ever going to get over it, frankly, given the report that you've read. And then it's time to reach out to someone like her and say, okay, what can we do for you? A lower sentence would, in our thinking, in the way of thinking, reflect the rules of, or the roles of mercy and forgiveness, which are both essential. What remains of her life is that she's been a good daughter and a good sister. She's a loving mother, 2 wonderful boys, young men. She's been a wonderful companion to her husband, Jeff, who completely adores her, and rightly so. She loved her community, and she absolutely loved being a police officer. And these are the relationships that mark a life and form the units of a life. And may these units of her life be the ultimate calculation for mitigation here. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then I'll allow Ms. Potter, if she wishes to address the court. Okay, so 15 minutes. Oh, you figured it out. Okay. Okay, Ms. Potter, would you like to address the court? Please go to the podium and you may remove your mask.
Thank you. To the family of Daunte Wright, I am so sorry that I brought the death of your father.
Okay, Ms. Potter, my court reporter can't hear you. So
Thank you. To the family of Daunte Wright, I am so sorry that I brought the death of your son, father, brother, uncle, grandson, nephew, and the rest of your family to your home. Katie, I understand a mother's love, and I am sorry I broke your heart. My heart is broken for all of you. Earlier, when you said that I didn't look at you during the trial, I don't believe I had a right to. I didn't even have a right to be in the same room with you. I am so sorry that I hurt you so badly. My heart is broken and devastated for all of you. I pray for Daunte and all of you many, many times a day. He is not more than one thought away from my heart, and I have no right for that, for him to be in my heart. I do pray that one day you can find forgiveness, only because hatred is so destructive to all of us. And that I pray peace will always be with you and your family. Again, I am so sorry. And to the community of Brooklyn Center, I do owe you an apology too. I loved working for you. And I am sorry what has happened to our community since the death of Daunte. The men and women who work for you still are good, honorable people and will work hard for you. Thank you, Your Honor.
thank you, Ms. Potter. Okay, this is one of the saddest cases I've had on my 20 years on the bench. On the one hand, a young man was killed, and on the other, a respected 26-year veteran police officer made a tragic error by pulling her handgun instead of her taser. Thank you to everyone who spoke. I have been profoundly moved by the comments of the Wright family. Daunte was very loved. His son has lost a father. And Mr. and Mrs. Wright, I cannot begin to understand the grief of losing a child. I'm so sorry for your loss. Kimberly Potter honorably served her community for 26 years as a police officer. She was a respected officer and consistently went over and above the call of duty. She's a wife, a mother, an aunt, a granddaughter, a colleague, and a friend to many. In addition to the letters that were forwarded to me by Mr. Ng, I received hundreds and hundreds of letters in her support from colleagues, family, friends, acquaintances, community leaders and members, and even strangers. I read them all. They paint a portrait of a woman who touched a lot of people in a good way. I want to talk briefly about the aggravating factors that were brought up in this case. As I mentioned before, the state initially took the position Ms. Potter should receive a sentence above the guidelines and filed a brief in support of two aggravating factors under Blakely. All parties agreed that I would determine whether aggravating factors existed to justify a harsher sentence than that set forth in the guidelines. I feel compelled to address the grounds for that request because they were made public, and I think it is important to note they were not proven in this case. The state did not meet its burden of proof on the first factor. It is based on defendant causing a greater than normal danger to the passenger in the car and two other officers when she fired. But the shot only hit Daunte Wright. The passenger and the officers were not injured by that shot. The cases cited by the state in its brief did not support its position. In fact, they illustrate why this case does not involve a greater than normal danger to others. In the Fleming case, he fired a gun 6 times in a park filled with children. In State versus Omaha, defendant fired numerous shots into 2 apartment buildings. There is no comparison here. The state also did not meet its burden of proof on the second Blakely factor. Contrary to the state's claims, Kimberly Potter did not abuse her position of authority. In fact, it is undisputed Ms. Potter or Officer Potter was in the line of duty and doing her job in attempting to lawfully arrest Daunte Wright on the warrant when she mistook her gun for her taser. What's more, she drew her taser legitimately to protect a fellow officer on the other side of the vehicle who could have been dragged and seriously injured if the car were to speed away. Officer Potter's conduct clearly was not significantly more serious than that typically involved in the commission of the crime in question, justifying an upward departure. Turning to defendant's request for a dispositional departure, there is no question that Ms. Potter is extremely remorseful. She showed that today. She showed that when it happened. It is also beyond dispute that she is particularly amenable to probation. But the court retains the discretion to make departure decisions independently. The court is not required to depart even where mitigating factors are present, and that's set forth in State versus Birch, 689 Northwest 2nd, 276, affirmed by the Supreme Court, 707 Northwest 2nd, 660. This has been an extremely difficult decision. In making my decision, I look to the purposes of incarceration. There are 4: retribution, incapacitation, deterrence, and rehabilitation. 3 of the 4 would not be served in this case. Incapacitation refers to the physical removal of a convicted person to prevent them from committing future crimes. That is not an issue in this case. Kimberly Potter does not present a danger of future crimes, obviously. Deterrence refers to the prevention of future crime and the idea that those who have committed crimes will be discouraged from reoffending after experiencing punishment. That purpose would not be served here. Rehabilitation is also not a purpose that would justify incarceration in this case. Ms. Potter does not require rehabilitation to become a law-abiding citizen. Retribution, or serving time as a way for a convicted person to pay for the harm inflicted on a victim, is the sole purpose that applies in this case. And in this case, a young man was killed because Officer Potter was reckless. There rightfully should be some accountability. Sentencing guidelines are just that. They are guidelines that inform a judge regarding sentencing for various crimes. They are not set in stone. The court has the discretion to depart from guidelines depending on the particular facts of a case. A downward durational departure is justified if a crime is less onerous than typical. Put another way, if the conduct is significantly less serious than that typically involved in the commission of the crime, sentencing below the guidelines is justified. I find the facts and circumstances here justify a downward departure from the guidelines. First, Officer Potter's conduct was significantly less serious than your typical manslaughter case. The misdemeanor predicate for the manslaughter count was reckless handling or use of a firearm. Here, everybody agrees, and the evidence is undisputed, that Officer Potter never intended to use her firearm. She mistakenly drew her firearm at all times, intending to use her taser. There were police officers and experts who testified that the use of her taser was reasonable and appropriate under the circumstances presented for officer safety reasons. The fact she never intended to draw her firearm makes this case less serious than other cases. Second, the scene was chaotic, tense, and rapidly evolving. Officer Potter was required to make a split-second judgment. That constitutes a mitigating circumstance. Finally, unlike other manslaughter 1 cases, Officer Potter's actions were not driven by personal animosity toward Daunte Wright. Instead, she was acting in the line of duty and effectuating a lawful arrest. This case is highly unusual. The other officer cases tried in this court are distinguishable. This is not a cop found guilty of murder for using his need to pin down a person for 9.5 minutes as he gasped for air. This is not a cop found guilty of manslaughter for intentionally drawing his firearm and shooting across his partner and killing an unarmed woman who approached his squad. This is a cop who made a tragic mistake. She drew her firearm thinking it was a taser and ended up killing a young man. Ms. Potter, will you please rise? Given all these considerations and having carefully considered the comments of the family and of both Daunte Wright and the comments of Kimberly Potter, as well as the arguments of counsel, it is the sentence and judgment of this court that you shall be committed to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 24 months. You shall serve 2/3 of that time, or 16 months in prison, and 1/3 on supervised release, assuming no disciplinary offenses or conditional release violations. You have credit for 58 days already served. Restitution will be reserved. There'll be a fine of $1,000 and a surcharge of $78 to be taken out of prison wages or due within 180 days. You must provide a DNA sample. You may not use or possess any firearms, ammunition, or explosives. You have the right to appeal the conviction and sentence. If you are unable to pay the cost of an appeal, you may apply for leave to appeal at state expense by contacting the state public defender. You may be seated, Ms. Potter. I'd like to make a few parting comments. I recognize there will be those who disagree with the sentence, that I granted a significant downward departure does not in any way diminish Daunte Wright's life. His life mattered. And to those who disagree and feel a longer prison sentence is appropriate, as difficult as it may be, please try to empathize with Ms. Potter's situation. As President Barack Obama once said, learning to stand in somebody else's shoes, to see through their eyes, that's how peace begins. And it's up to you to make that happen. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world. Officer Kimberly Potter was trying to do the right thing. Of all the jobs in public service, police officers have the most difficult one. They must make snap decisions under tense, evolving, and ever-changing circumstances. They risk their lives every single day in public service. Officer Potter made a mistake that ended tragically. She never intended to hurt anyone. Her conduct cries out for a sentence significantly below the guidelines. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kelly.